What is going on, everybody? I am back today to start my 2024 list series. So, this is going to be a series of videos that are lists of my favorite, my least favorite movies of the year, underrated movies, and today's list, which will be my most disappointing movies of 2024. So, these aren't necessarily the worst movies of the year, but these are going to be the movies that I had some level of hype for, that I was really excited about, that let me down in one way or another. And as I say when I make these videos every single year, this is just my opinion. It's probably going to be different than the opinion that you have, but I'm just going to share some of my thoughts as to why these movies didn't work for me as well as I'd hoped that they would. These are in no particular order, but without further ado, let's get started. So first up is going to probably be the most controversial one on this list, and that is the animated movie Flow. I've seen a lot of positive reactions to this movie. There are a lot of people that have it in their top 5 films of the year, and unfortunately, nothing about this movie worked for me at all, and I really wanted it to, being someone who loves animals and who animals are such a big part of my life. I was really hoping that this would connect with me in one way or another, but it didn't. For starters, I did not like the animation. It felt very much like video game animation in a way that wasn't all that impressive. I made a joke in my initial review that the dog in this felt like the mascot from Nintendogs, which honestly made this level of disconnect that was hard to kind of fully empathize for what the animals were going through. I did think a lot of the landscape shots and the creation of that through the animation was really beautiful, but the problem I had with this movie, it felt like the same scene over and over again. It was just an animal on a boat, got in danger, they saved the animal, and then it would just happen again and again and again. And I lost interest in the first 25 minutes of the movie, and it never really pulled me back in. There was one really cool, sort of surreal moment that I thought was handled really well, but I just left not feeling much about the movie. It's very much forced sentimentality towards animals, and there's nothing else. The entire film hinges on the creators hoping that you'll just be attached because it's cute animals. And as much as I love cute animals, when it comes to filmmaking, I need a lot more than that for a movie to work for me. Up next is the film The Front Room. I was very excited to watch this movie as soon as I heard that Robert Eggers' brothers were making a movie with A24, and this is nothing like what Robert Eggers would make. This movie was a mess. I will say I enjoyed the performances. I thought there were some schlocky, campy elements to it that kind of pushed it into the so bad it's good territory. But unfortunately, as a whole movie, it's relatively uninteresting. I felt like the pacing was really bad. There wasn't anything truly that horrific. There were some cheap jump scares in the movie. I felt like where the movie went in the third act wasn't all that engaging or interesting, and it had moments where my interest was there. Like Brandy was really giving it her all, and I really appreciated her performance, but some of the other actors in the movie did not do as great of a job, and I felt like just as a whole the concept wasn't fully realized, which is disappointing because I can see the vision here, and it probably could have been something really neat in the hands of a different director. Up next is the film Strange Darling. This is one of the more beloved like thrillers of the year, but I found this movie to be incredibly formulaic and predictable. It felt like someone who just really loved Quentin Tarantino trying to make their own Quentin Tarantino movie. The whole like shot in 35 millimeter at the beginning of the film kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit, and it is beautifully shot. I really like the color palettes. I really appreciated the performances in this movie. I thought that both actors did a very great job, but the problem is the non-linear structure didn't always work to the film's advantage. I felt like the movie went in the most predictable direction possible. Like when everyone was saying that this movie, the whole thing relied on the twist, my mind immediately went to, well, that's really the only twist that you could pull off. And of course, it's the direction that it went. And there's one scene, I talk about it in my full review, that I think was handled relatively poorly. And so all of those things made the movie a less than stellar experience for me. Next is the film Janet Planet, a coming of age movie produced by A24 that I was very excited to watch because I heard some people say that it was in a similar vein to After Sun, which is one of my favorite films of the decade so far. And unfortunately, this movie was nothing like After Sun. I felt like the pacing was really terrible. I feel like the movie was sort of messy when it came to its plot structure. It was really just a mother meeting these people that came into her life at specific moments, and I feel like the emotional impact was supposed to be built on how these people impacted her as a person and what the daughter sort of witnessed through those things, but it was all kind of underwhelming. I didn't feel like any of the interactions left a really heavy emotional toll on me as a viewer, I just felt like it was going from place to place to place without any real lasting impact. There were some charming moments. I think the performances were really great. The cinematography was gorgeous. I thought the movie looked beautiful, but it's almost 2 hours long and it just didn't feel like it earned it. And so that was disappointing because there was a lot of hype around this movie. It just didn't work for me. Up next is In a Violent Nature, the slasher film shot from the perspective of the killer. This is a movie I was looking forward to seeing all year long, and unfortunately, it didn't work for me. I feel like, number one, the creators of the film didn't even live up to their own gimmick. Halfway through the movie, it jumps perspectives. You're no longer seeing it from the killer's point of view, and that's when it becomes far less interesting. Most of the characters who are being killed off, they're so bland and uninteresting, and then they do try to add a final girl into the movie who I just felt like didn't have any of the characteristics of what makes a final girl so great to watch in any of these slasher movies. It was very predictable, and I really like the idea of just these slow, lingering shots of the killer getting to point A to point B, and I feel like that there was some sort of messaging here about the contrast of the peace and serenity of nature mixed with the violence from human beings, but it was never lingered on enough to really sit and resonate with you. It just kind of was get there, move on to the next person, which like was cool for the first 20 minutes, and then it just got really tiresome. And there were some really neat practical effects in this. I really liked the look of the killer, but unfortunately this was really underwhelming comparatively to what it was hyped up to be. Up next is Humane. I was super excited for this movie because it was directed by Caitlin Cronenberg, who is the daughter of David Cronenberg and the sister of Brandon Cronenberg. And Brandon and David have made some movies that are some of my favorites of all time, so I was really hoping that Caitlin would follow in their footsteps. And unfortunately, this movie did not live up to any of their work. This felt like a really cheap, rough around the edges sci-fi original movie. The performances were okay. Some of them were way worse than others. I really liked the premise. I thought that it was super interesting. It just wasn't effective because you could really kind of see just how low budget this movie was, unfortunately, which I always respect, you know, working with what budget you have. But I feel like for the vision this had, it needed so much more. You only got glimpses into little things. And I felt like most of the conflict between the characters, it just felt very forced and inauthentic, so that it made like the twists and turns of the movie not work as well as I think that she wanted it to. But I will still watch movies that Caitlin makes in the future. I really hope that she just takes the good parts of this movie and grows on them for future projects. Up next is La Chimera. This is a movie that's being very loved by the art house community, and I feel like my feelings about La Chimera are very similar to the way I felt about Cate Blanchett's Tar, a movie that I think is beautifully shot, has absolutely incredible performances, but I felt absolutely nothing when it was over, unfortunately. I didn't feel like the whole emotional payoff that they were going for worked, especially because of some of the brutally slow pacing in the middle part of the movie. It jumps to these little sort of like slice of life vignettes that don't necessarily feel like they're attributing to what the director's overall message in the third act is. It gets into this fantastical realism towards the end of the movie that I just felt like was very unearned, unfortunately. I really liked the idea of where it was going, but it just needed more sauce to kind of get to the finish line. I liked this whole concept of like people creating things and then them being lost after people die, people rediscovering it and kind of just like using it as a commodity or selling it, not really appreciating it for what it is. I really like that whole concept, but it feels like such a small part of the movie that it just doesn't really resonate for the whole almost 2+ hours that this thing goes on for. And yeah, it's disappointing because there's really great performances here and it's beautifully shot, but I just felt relatively empty after it was over. Up next is Late Night with the Devil. I feel like this is another horror movie that's been really widely talked about throughout the year, and I just felt like this was very run-of-the-mill. Other than David Dastmalchian's incredible performance, this felt like a ton of other movies that have already existed. Wasn't a huge fan of the pace. There were some super nonsensical filmmaking decisions, like saying that it was was the live recording of this broadcast with some behind the scenes footage, but like the behind the scenes footage wasn't just a guy carrying a camera. You got these like shot reverse shot sequences which didn't really make any sense, as like a, okay, you have that many people with cameras following them when they're backstage. Like the logic was just kind of stripped away. I felt like the way it built up anxiety and dread just didn't really linger with me throughout the movie. And I liked where it was trying to go with the third act blow up, but some of the visual effects were truly horrendous, especially the one with the young girl at the end. It just looked really bad. And yeah, I just have no interest in watching this movie again. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but there are so many movies in the same vein as it that are much better. Up next is The Watchers by Ishana Night Shyamalan, M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. I was really looking forward to it for that very reason, just to see what she was going to do in the horror sphere. And while I really liked the look of the movie, and I feel like there were some decent performances in it, the story was incredibly underwhelming. It went in a very fantastical direction, which I can respect, but most of the runtime was just incredibly bland and predictable. I was just waiting for more and more as the movie went on, and I was just never gifted that. I was just mostly bored out of my mind through the runtime of this movie, unfortunately. And I feel like there's potential here. The movie looks really nice. She got decent enough performances out of her actors that I feel like if she wants to venture into the game again, she 100% could. And I'd be curious to see what she could bring to the table if she tries to make another movie. And then last on the list is a movie I actually really enjoyed, but I just wanted a lot more, and that's Lisa Frankenstein. This movie was really entertaining. Don't get me wrong. I love the aesthetic of it. I love the way it's shot. I thought the performances were really great, but it just felt like something was missing the whole time I was watching it. I think about Diablo Cody and work that she did when it came to Jennifer's Body, and just how incredible that movie was and how impactful that movie was. And this movie just felt like it was lacking everything that made that movie special. There were a lot of really great moments that I was laughing and that I was engaged, but just like felt like things were tidied up and wrapped up too easily. The movie felt like it took way too long to kind of get into gear to where it needed to go to keep you engaged. And once it got to that point, I was hooked and I had a smile on my face and I thought it was really fun. But I kept thinking about all of the things that could have been changed to make it a truly incredible viewing experience. And unfortunately, it just wasn't. It was an enjoyable, turn your brain off movie that I think could have been much more than it actually was. So what were some of the most disappointing films of 2024 for you? Let me know in the comments. These were just some of mine. I really had high hopes for all of these, and they all let me down in one way or another. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I've got a lot more lists coming up here in the next few days, and I really look forward to sharing them with you. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.